to Sandy and Nora's podcast.
Hey, Nora.
Hey, Sandy.
How are you? Oh my God, what a weird summer. It's like, it feels like no place is safe from the awful effects of the climate crisis right now. How are you doing?
Yeah, for us here in Quebec City, it's actually been weird. We've had a pretty chilly summer. Pretty chilly. Like, not one day have I wanted to be at the pool. I think today that is the first day that my kid was like, we got to go to the pool. It's hot outside, since we've been back from vacation. But yeah, I've been like wearing jackets and sweaters and sweatpants. And so that's definitely weird. I'm not going to complain about that because I actually prefer that weather to anything hot. But pretty weird. And I know parts of Canada are blanketed in forest fire smoke. Parts of Canada are in evacuation due to forest fires. And I know that a lot of people have been paying attention to politicians like Doug Ford, who have been slamming the fact that there's no federal plan to deal with forest fires, as if he isn't the head of a province that also needs its own plan to deal with forest fires. And of course, his government has cut the budgets to forest fire fighting and fire management. And it's just one of these things where it's like, it's too hot in most parts of Canada, apparently not here. It's too hot for this kind of bullshit, you know?
Yeah. Well, I mean, we've put all sorts of money into the police, both in Ontario and federally and elsewhere around the country. So maybe they can solve the problem, you know?
Yeah.
That's what brings safety, Nora. Maybe they can solve the problem. No, yeah. I have been a bit frustrated reading some of the media on it because I've been reading U.S. sources and Canadian sources, and I think it's so weird. It's like the idea of a country is like, it's like one of those things where that doesn't really make sense for this kind of a crisis, right? Because of course there's all this news about, you know, the forest fires in Canada and how it's like causing all of these problems in the United States with respect to air quality and so on, which is just obfuscating the fact that there's a ton of forest fires in the United States too.
Yep.
And like, not just on the West Coast, like in Minnesota, in Michigan, all along the eastern coast. And it's very strange that that's like not part of the discussion, because it's not just that like Canada is on fire, quote unquote. It's that there are a lot of regions in North America that are particularly vulnerable to forest fires right now. And that probably requires some sort of joint strategy and a way to talk about that isn't just like weirdly bordered by these fictive borders that, you know, the climate doesn't fucking care about. And so anyway, that's just been a frustration of mine as I've been reading all of the news. Here in LA, it's been a bit of a heat wave for the last couple of weeks. It doesn't really get over 30 degrees here. Like, that's not really something that happens, but it is. It's like a 35 is what we're getting, and that's when we get heat warnings and so on. And of course, we've had a couple fires ourselves. There was a huge warehouse fire recently that, I mean, God, the air just smelled. It always smells terrible when there's fires, but the warehouse fire, it was like the destruction of food. It was a food warehouse, and then the rotting of that food, and then the building itself, and they just like couldn't put it out for like a week or something like that. It was terrible. And then I was just in Europe for an academic conference, and oh my God, Nora, it got up to like 40 degrees some days. 42, I think, was the highest while I was there. And it's literally like the place that I was staying in was air conditioned, which isn't, you know, a guarantee over in Europe. And like, it just like, even though it was air conditioned, it couldn't really handle how hot it was. It was still hot everywhere you went. All the time. And it was just terrible. It was really, really terrible. So, not great.
Yeah.
Didn't feel great.
Yeah. Speaking of fire, it's not a forest fire, but there was a piece of news from southwestern Ontario that got very little attention outside of the region. And it also was a fire. One of the biggest pig farms in Norfolk County burned to the ground, and it killed some number of pigs. And it's kind of wild the way that it's reported, because there's no information on how many pigs exactly. The barn was 200,000 square feet, and the deputy fire chief, all he says, as reported in the Hamilton Spectator by JP Antonacci, is that it held between 20,000 and 30,000 pigs, but that the fire chief didn't have a final confirmation from the owners. The owner said that the loss is about $30 million. But doesn't that just right there tell you everything about like how factory farming has way too much power in this province? Like, sorry, the owners didn't have to tell fire how many pigs were in that farm? Like, as if they don't know? Of course they know. They know to the trough what is in that barn, because every one of those pigs is a profit. They absolutely know that. And yet here's fire services saying, yeah, we don't know. We just know that it was a $30 million cost. We don't know the cause of the fire. The farm was insured. And isn't that too bad? Some number of pigs, but it's like 20 to 30,000 pigs dying in a single fire. I mean, that seems like that should be national news. I don't know. But I guess it's out of sight, out of mind, because people might stop eating pork if they found out that there were farms that were that enormous.
Just awful. It's man. I mean, it's just going to get worse and worse every year, right? Like here we are. We've got recently that strange like public address from Mark Carney being like, "Hey guys, sorry, we're doing the pipeline thing," and it's like, here we are. Like this is the consequence of like continuing to defer this problem be like, we'll deal with it later. Right now, we have to deal with the economy. Well, I mean, this is the economy too, and it's not looking good.
It's not looking good, but we do have a couple of people to thank.
We have some people to thank and some other things to talk about today. So let's go. Who are we thinking this week, Nora?
Yeah, thanks so much to everybody that shared the podcast. Hope that you liked the episode from last week with Luke LeBrun at Press Progress. Did something a little bit different there because Sandy was away, and I'd love to hear your feedback. We're also doing something different as well with the Daily News, and you've probably seen it by now that there's a Daily News digest that you can listen to all episodes of the Daily News without having to go through all of the ads on the Daily News feed, and we're putting that out on the Sandy and Nora feed. So you can catch that every Saturday morning. It's literally just a recap of all of the Daily News headlines that went the week before, and it runs between 25 and 35 minutes. So that's cool. Thanks again to John Camille Farah for his wonderful music in that episode, in that series too, episode, series, feature, whatever. And thanks to new donors, all new donors this week to thank. Thank you to Saskatoon Crisp, Victoria R, and Petra. You folks are awesome. Thank you so much for the financial support, and to everybody that supports the podcast in whatever way that you do.
Thank you so much. Nora, can I talk to you about like a pet peeve that I'm currently experiencing? And I'm wondering if anybody else, any of our listeners, are also experiencing this.
Of course. Is it related to the taste of the color purple?
No, it is not related to the taste of the color purple, but I feel very passionately about that. It is about AI speak. So I know that that like you can tell when something is written by AI. It's got like a lot of tells. There's a certain formula that it seems like large language models tend to use when creating a block of text. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, totally. I mean, okay, sure. Actually, I should say yes, but also there are times where I can't tell. But when things fall into a pattern, it's like, oh, that's interesting that we're all talking like that right now.
Yeah. I mean, if you don't know what I'm talking about, it's the thing where, I don't know, there'll be like a list, and the list is so very obviously follows a pattern. I mean, humans tend to follow patterns in writing generally. Like most times when someone is like talking about a list of things, very often you'll find a list of 3, like if someone is giving an example. But AI does it all the time. Even if like an example of 3 things are like 2 things that don't make sense and 1 thing that does, like, so if you were saying something like, I don't know, purple fruits should taste purple, such as, plums, grapes, and something else, I don't know. And, like that is one of the formulas that artificial intelligence follows. Another one is this thing where it'll like give you a thesis statement and maybe some examples, and then it does this thing where there's like a sentence that points to, okay, we want you to pay attention to this, and it usually will be like, and here's where it gets interesting, or and this is the thing that really matters, or and this is what we really need to pay attention to. It's like a sentence that just gives here's the thing that I want you to really focus on. And it might not be a thing that you really need to focus on that follows. Like it doesn't necessarily make sense for the entire concept that is being given, but it follows this very specific formula. There's also other things, like people early on figured out that there's a lot of M dashes. That seems to be going away now because the large language models, the people who create them have figured out that people don't like to see a lot of M dashes or are using that as a tell, so they're going away. Anyway, all that stuff, right? So I'm at this academic conference and I notice, like some people are like gifted speakers and can just like present their papers, whatever, without giving it much thought. And some people are like reading their presentations, which is fine. That's totally normal. But I noticed that there's a bunch of people who are speaking like AI. And once I noticed it, I couldn't not notice it. I could tell who had written their oral statements with AI and who hadn't, because they were following this very specific formula. And I was like, it just like it kind of like took me out of my being present, and I was just like, like I can't not hear this, because no one would write like an academic paper in this way. And it was just very, very strange. It was a strange experience. And then I started to notice it in like podcasts that I listened to, and seeing it on certain videos on Instagram and so on. And I was like, oh my God, people are just starting to talk all the same, or like speak like AI. And I guess because they're using AI to help formulate their thoughts. And I wonder how much of it is just like, this is how people are talking now. I don't know. But it was just like, it felt very, very, very dystopian. It's like the experience of, did you read A Clockwork Orange like in school when you were like?
No, I did not.
In English? You never did? Okay, so
no.
A Clockwork Orange has this language that's embedded into A Clockwork Orange that doesn't like explain to you. It's like all of the slang of the really futuristic world. It's a sci-fi novel. It's a really futuristic world, and it has this its own language. And at the beginning, when you're reading the book, like you don't know what anything means. You're like, what is this referring to? And by the end of the book, you're thinking in that language. It's like a really interesting experience to read. It's like, I thought it was fascinating when I was young. And it kind of feels like that. It kind of feels like that's what's happening to people around me. And it is very dissettling.
Huh. Yeah, I knew that about Clockwork Orange. I never read it, but I always likened it to reading Irvine Welsh. And all of his novels are written in Scottish dialect, and it's exactly like that. You're like, what the hell in the beginning? And you're right that by the end you start thinking in this Scottish dialect that you have no contact with at all, other than all of his books. It sounds to me like these generative AI large language models are being trained by like TED Talks or something like that.
Oh, that's really interesting. I wonder, potentially. I mean, it would make sense. They're trained on the accessible internet. So
Yeah. 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 I think that makes a lot of sense that people would be adapting how they're speaking to how they're seeing other people speak. And that might have a giant influence from AI. And I guess the real question then is like, what's wrong with that? Is there something wrong with that? Like, aside from it being irritating to certain people, like, you, and I would be very irritated by that. Is there a problem with this? And I think that has to be kind of where we anchor the conversation in the cultural influence that relying on these tools to write for us actually the impact that this actually has on how we speak, how we write, and how we understand things to be in the world. It's funny because I have one friend who you also know who always talks in lists, and whenever he's making an argument, he always talks in lists. This is just how he talks, and there's always like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, depending on how many points in his argument. And I find it very charming. Every time that we have a discussion, and he's pulling out his finger and going 1 and 2 and 3, it's like, I wonder if he realizes that he always talks in lists. This is something that I've noticed over many, many years of being friends with him, and is not something that he's picked up from the internet necessarily. This is just his own, rhetorical style. But if there is convergence around how a computer believes we are supposed to speak to one another, I mean, aside from all of the other problems with AI, like the giant amounts of theft and the giant amounts of resources that go into powering the generative AI, it is interesting that as our language has been given to the machine and the machine has remixed it and gives it back to us, and that then starts to influence how we speak to one another, I wonder if we lose certain human characteristics that are really, really important to speech. So things like, I don't know, authenticity, meeting the moment, being able to think on your feet and changing how you're structuring what you're saying to be as compelling as possible. Like I guess this is a question I have. Is it different, or is it functionally the same thing as someone who learns how to give an effective speech, or someone who learns how to write an effective essay, let's say, just following the format? Is there something different about AI actually influencing how we're communicating with one another that is different than just like learning best practices or models, copying models in how we already communicate?
Yeah, I think it's like, and I don't want to spend the entire episode on this, but I do think there is something a little bit different depending on how people are using the AI, the large language model, whatever, right? Because you learn in school potentially like the hamburger method to like writing an essay, right? And then eventually, like once you got that down, you like add your own flair to it, or you decide which rules you want to break, or you're like, I'm funny, so I want to put some jokes in here, or I want to be unexpected, whatever. You figure out how to put your own personality into it. And like people who are really great writers, people who are comedians, people who are really great at improvisation can use other tools on the scaffolding that they've been taught in order to like make writing or communication more interesting. And that's like stuff that we love. We love that. I think as people who are generally communicators, I love experiencing the unexpected in some form of communication. I think that if so many people are relying on the tool or the scaffolding or whatever, that they are no longer putting themselves back into the work that they're producing. They're no longer putting themselves back into the form of communication. I mean, it becomes like very, very rote. And I mean, that could be the case for anybody all the time, but it wasn't, right? Like it wasn't so formulaic that I could go to an academic conference and be like, all of these people have been trained on the exact same format of writing, and I don't know the personality of you, or you. Like that was not the case. Now I think that what's happening is like an over-reliance that makes it so that, in fact, it's so formulaic that I couldn't focus on what was being communicated because all I could see was the formula, Right.
Yeah. And that totally makes sense. In some ways I kind of liken it to the frustration that I have with live radio being replaced by podcasts. And I've said this before on this podcast. Like I don't like that there's no spontaneity in this. You know, if something happens right now, if I'm in the middle of an earthquake and I'm like, oh, Sandy, the earth is moving from underneath me. Oh my God. I mean, I could release it pretty quickly, and I guess people can hear what my reaction was. But there's something to the liveness of media that I think is what captures the deepest parts of ourselves, and that's why media is so powerful. Is that you do get that possibility of spontaneity. You do get that possibility of creativity, and when something's canned, like when you have some AI music, when you have recorded music, when you don't have on stage with a group the band that's playing the soundtrack, and the soundtrack's just being played as a track, you lose a lot of the humanity, and you lose a lot of the beauty that's in a lot of stuff, and we just kind of hollow out our the beauty that is around us, right? It turns into this land of fake plastic trees, which I think is something that we don't really, I don't think we've intellectualized enough. Like, I don't think that there is enough philosophical thinking that is reaching average people on these things and on the impact that this has on us, you know, in general, especially because iterations, like when you iterate on something, when you take something and you change it and you change it and you change it and you change it, iterations are interesting because people add certain things to that iteration. But when it's a computer that's iterating, it's going to follow certain commands. It's going to follow whatever it's been programmed to follow. And what you're going to get at the end of that process of several iterations and then fed back to, you know, a person is going to be flat and boring. You know, I love reading old books. I just read the history of the House of Rothschild. It was a book that I picked up in
that sounds interesting.
It was interesting. It was a book I picked up in Regina at a big like church basement sale, like a 50-cent book. And I don't know anything about the Rothschild family at all. I just knew they were like them, the Habsburgs, like, you know, these are two giant families in Europe, right? And so I picked it up. It's a cheap book, and the book is very, very positive on the family. It shows the rags to riches story of basically what was 7 generations of like this powerful banking family across of Europe, and it's written by Morton, I think, and the way that it's written is so good. Like the contents, it's not critical. It's not saying like maybe this wealth is bad. It's not like, it's just a description of the stories of the family because the author had direct access to the family. And it's like they use words and they describe things and it's explanatory in ways that you cannot get today. And as a writer, I am very concerned that we either have very standard boring writing, or the writing is so far out there that you're like, hey, I can't make sense of this. There doesn't really seem to be a practice where we're actually kind of not in the middle of those two poles, but like playing with those two poles in a way that I don't know, that elicits excitement. Like some of the stuff I read that tries to go really far on the creative side is like, I mean, I get it. You've read like, you know, James Joyce. But this is not that. This is like, what in the hell are you trying to do here? And I think it's like a massive attempt, which is an overcorrection, an attempt to inject some sort of humanity problems, difficulties into a text that when we're actually just so used to seeing the most sanitized, boring version of it. And I think I'll just mention too, like one of my favorite reviews that was in Maclean's was a review written by Heather O'Neill about Sarah Polley. And I don't remember if it was about like women talking or if it was just about Sarah Polley's new book or whatever. This was a couple of years ago. And what I loved the most about this feature on Sarah Polley was, you know, Heather O'Neill is a fiction writer. She is a very creative writer. The stuff that she writes I find very fascinating, even if I'm not totally in love with the book, but I just love the way that she writes. At the end of this huge feature, there must have been, I don't know, 10 or 20 corrections and clarifications made. And I love that because I'm sure O'Neill approached this as like, I am writing creative nonfiction. And if some things are not 100% accurate, who cares? Because what I'm effectively doing is I'm trying to reach you on a different level. And in that process, I might get this date wrong, this size wrong, this detail wrong, but it doesn't actually matter because what stays with you is how I've written this and what you take away from what I have given to you. And here's all the corrections of the pieces of the article that I got a little bit off.
Yeah, I really love that you're pointing out like the real danger here is like creativity and like personality and so on. And I think that that's really what it is. You know, like you can't teach a large language model or a machine learning tool to have the same kind of creativity that humans have. Like that seems like, I mean, if it's possible, we're certainly not there. But even beyond that, it's like the process of creation is itself an interesting thing that becomes part of the creation, like being able to then say like why you approach something in a particular way, and why the dates were important or not important, and so on. You know, like that kind of thing is also important. And I just, you know, I really value that, and I don't want to see that lost. And I worry about, you know, I know that some people are talented and some people are not, and some people like writing and some people don't, and some people enjoy communication and some people don't, and so on. Sure. So some people are going to rely on tools and some people are going to really enjoy the process. I understand that. But I just, when it becomes so easy to rely on the tool, it's like so easy to choose the tool rather than to develop your own voice. I don't know, that feels like something that's really dangerous and kind of sad to me.
Well, I mean, the loss of voice is actually really is a really frightening thing for me. I think that voice is so important because it's in that voice that people give to others something very, very special. You know, we just finished the Festival d'été de Québec, the FEC, the Quebec Summer Festival, Quebec City Summer Festival, where it's like, you know, 11 nights of 5 stages of 100,000 people every single night going downtown to watch different shows. And it was kind of amazing to me to see the difference between performers that were doing things that were very derivative, very boring, very derivative, beats that were very boring, background tracks that were very boring, vocals that were fine. You know, like people don't have to be incredible singers or musicians necessarily if they've got something to share. But there was certainly some acts that I was just like, this is so boring that I cannot believe this passed the censors. Fine. And then there were acts that were doing things that were so interesting, taking huge risks with weird sounds, weird rhythms, strange combinations, really bold statements, not shying away from experimenting with things. And those were the acts where you were like, oh my God, there is a pulse on stage. There is charisma on stage. The music is authentic and some of it's very basic and some of it's very complex, but ultimately we were being given something that someone was like, I bet you I can change the time signature like 6 different times in this track and I can make it sound like I'm going to blow people's minds, or I'm going to play this really basic chord progression, but I'm going to give them something, whether it's the lyrics, whether it's the stage presence, whether it's the understanding of performance and relationship with the audience, that's going to be really special and that's going to stay with them. And I think that this is really what the two poles are within our society. And as you say, there's a lot of really boring technical writing that what somebody can justify using ChatGPT for because otherwise they don't have time for it or they're not very good writers or whatever. But ultimately, like we all have to find our voice and our authenticity. And whether that voice and authenticity is going to shine through in the plumbing work that someone does, in the workplace behavior and meaning that it might have in a work site that has nothing to do with like unbridled creativity, or if that's just about like ourselves having knowing who we are and knowing what that voice is and knowing that if we use something like ChatGPT, it's going to just obliterate that voice. And maybe it's good for our short-term time management, but ultimately like it's boring as hell. Like this is a real crisis, I think, for society. And I'm so interested that this came to you at a conference where you're supposed to be experiencing people's research and people who might not be performers, might be quite boring presenters because that's just not their thing. But ultimately, that what you picked up on wasn't the fact that people were boring or that their research was uninteresting, but actually it was flat and it sounded like everyone else's research, which is like going to make it impossible for you to listen because it's so boring.
Yeah, yeah, and the thing is, like, I have tolerance for boring. Okay, like I have a really good focus and really good tolerance for boring. But when it was just so, again, formulaic, you know where I experienced this on the other side, like the wonder and the beauty and the magic. I know I'm always talking about like. How social media sucks and AI sucks, but okay, here's an example of something that I love on social media. There are like I follow some accounts that are just about math. I know it sounds a bit weird, but it's just about like math. And I didn't love math growing up. Like I kind of, I found it boring. But there are people who have like figured out a way to communicate about like the wonder and beauty of math, putting their own personality into it and their own like love for like discovery of something like really interesting and like to explain a mathematical problem. I love that watching that stuff on social media. I maybe that makes me like very strange, but I'm like into it. I think it's so interesting. And I just, it's like the problem in the reverse. Like, when you're growing up and you're learning about math and there's like only one way to really communicate about math, and they make math so rote and boring and like really formulaic, and then like realizing there's a whole other way that people could have been talking about math as we're growing up. Like some people have that benefit to have like people who are teachers who are really, really into it and can explain math in a different way and can talk about math in ways that are really interesting, right? And to see that like people bring their own personalities and communication styles, and again, like just the pure wonder of explaining something. People who you can tell have like thought about it for a while. If you think about how to communicate something for a while and you discover like a really great way to communicate something, it's like it's awesome. It's great to be able to figure out a new way to communicate something. Man, like I love that. That's so great. And like taking that away would be so sad. It would be so sad. It's such a wonderful thing to experience. People explaining something that could be really complex, really boring, or feels like it has no value even to regular life, and to make it come alive for somebody else.
Mm-hmm. But that's so critical, because otherwise, what the hell are you going to do with math? Do you know, like math is boring. Like, it just is. And you can use a calculator and you can do all the math that you need to do. And this is, I think, one of the reasons for why it is so hard to convince people to go into subjects like math, at higher levels, because it is boring and formulaic. And you do need to find that excitement and that beauty in all subjects if you're going to stick with it, if it's going to be interesting and fun. I think that like there's been a couple of articles in the last month about how take-home assignments are coming back at like near perfect for all students, versus in-class assignments are, of course, being graded at like, where you would expect to fall in a bell curve and maybe even a bit lower, because higher education has been so destroyed by neoliberalism. There's an incentive for professors to not have to mark all people's exams. There's an incentive to give people the most basic kind of questions, because you've got too many students and you don't have any time and blah, blah, blah. But when you're forcing people to actually do the work in class, that's where you start to actually see, oh, they're doing the work themselves, right? Because they can't necessarily rely on things like ChatGPT. And I think one of the things that was so critical for me, and I'm a writer, so fine, but it wasn't like I was going to be a writer necessarily. Actually, that's not true. I always wanted to be a writer. But anyway, okay, whatever. I learned, as you said, how to write an essay, and then I learned how to break apart the rules for writing an essay, and then I learned how to write in my own voice. And that was a multi-year process that I would say didn't really wrap up until I was probably in my late 20s. And then by the time I was in my late 20s, I had that voice, and then I could play with it in different ways. And, to this day, I write things that are, straightforward ahead, not very technical presentations that are just like blah, blah, blah. And I try to write a little bit more creatively when I have the chance as well. And I think that, if you don't have if you're not forced to do it in some ways, like then you're just not going to do it. And as I say, you cannot iterate if you're always feeding the machine your ideas and the machine tells back to you what you should do with those ideas. That should be you. your first draft and your second draft of anything should be you and then you. And maybe there's time in between those two drafts. Maybe there's a walk, maybe there's some sleeping or a shower, but you're coming back to something as if you're looking at it with fresh eyes, as if it was written by someone else. And you can identify things that you like about yourself and that you don't like about yourself, right? Writing, creativity, doing things, math, experiments, scientific experiments, building things. These are all battles against the self. And when you replace one of the steps of the battle against the self with a battle against the self, against the computer, against the self, we're changing the fundamental battle against the self that is fundamental to creative production. And I think that's really fascinating.
Yeah.
That's really interesting.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I guess this is what this whole episode is about. we were going to talk about hope, but I do think that there's like a bit of hope kind of embedded in this conversation, because the interesting thing is that people are, I think, starting to I'm seeing more people recognizing that this is happening and also being frustrated by it, which, I don't know, I think allows people to either have discussions like the discussion we are having, or to understand that there is something special about a creative process. For those who engage in creative processes, I mean, you know this, I don't have to tell you. Like, if you are a writer, for example, if you write nonfiction, you can be trying to figure something out. And then as you write it, because you're writing and engaging with your own writing, you're having a discussion with yourself while you're writing. You can figure something out that you would not have been able to figure out had you not engaged in that process of writing and rewriting. It makes you smarter. It's part of how your brain is able to process something. There's all sorts of science behind this too, of how the brain processes and being able to communicate with yourself. And then also, I imagine that that's the same with different types of art. I mean, I'm a singer. I have engaged in choral art since I was a kid. And, you learn a song. Okay, so you learn exactly how to sing a song, and then you put yourself into the song. So you figure out how to add a flair. Maybe you're going to change the timing a little bit so it's a little bit more interesting, or maybe you change the harmonies. You make it minor or you make it major. You figure something out to make whatever you've learned that just has its own formula just a little bit more interesting. And you figure things out about yourself, and you figure things out about the world and how things work and fit together. And that process itself is really, really fun, exciting, and kind of indescribable. It's a really great thing to have the privilege to engage in that. And, I worry about using AI for young people especially, because not being able to develop that skill or to even have that experience because someone's shown you a way that doesn't have the kind of difficulty that you might have to experience in order to get to the point of discovery. I feel so, I feel that there's a lot to lose there. But again, there's hope in this too, because I think that people do realize that there's a roteness to AI, whether it was, from Shrimp Jesus to M dashes, people can see the kind of uncanny valley in AI, even if they can't see it right away. People are starting to pick it up and to understand that there's something human that's missing in it.
Yeah, I mean, all of modern capitalist society is about alienating ourselves from our work, right? Alienation is one of the drivers of a lot of the problems that, like, social problems, psychological problems that we experience within modern capitalism. And the theory, it goes that if you don't have the ability to witness the sum total of creation that goes into what you're producing as a worker, like as a worker, if you're only doing this minor thing in a large assembly line of other things, you don't get to have the satisfaction of actually completing something. And the more that we're alienated from our work, the more that our authentic selves, our authentic work cannot be reflected in the actual work that we're being paid to do, the more that drives us crazy, really. And I think that, like, all of the obsession in talking about AI as if it's going to take everybody's jobs is ridiculous because, of course, you can't make profits without actually having wage labor as part of the process. If there was a way to actually have computers do people's work and make someone a lot of money, we would have seen a fundamental transformation of the economy started 40 years ago that would look different than from where we are today. But what it is doing is continuously eroding any amount of personality, of personal pride, and of control that we have over our own labor that then gives us the sense of meaning and of value and of control over our working lives. And so when you jack up the alienation through certain things like, oh, and now you're going to use AI. And even worse than that, you're going to have to use AI, which you're going to hate, and you're going to bang your head against the desk because it's not going to work very well. And then you're going to have to fix the problems caused by AI because these systems are not perfect and they do require a lot of human intervention. And then all of a sudden, your work is not just alienated in the sense of, well, all I do is put the cover on the seatbelt holder in a million cars over the course of my lifetime. Your alienation is driven by the fact that you are being forced to interface with this hyper irritating system that doesn't work very well, that creates more work and more problems from you, and that you can see very clearly is a smokescreen for what really is the problems within your workplace, which of course you know very well because you're the worker, you're the one doing this all the time. And that's why empowerment, and there is empowerment that comes with taking control over the work that you're doing and bringing back meaning to that work. And so when we're thinking about how AI alienates us even further from the work that we're already alienated from under capitalism, then it makes a lot of sense why people are feeling collectively and individually worse than they have ever felt. I mean, I think that it's pretty clear that we are running to highly destructive things to deal with the fact that we have psychological and sociological problems that are resulting from that alienation of work. And some of the things that we'll run to, of course, is like, well, we can't sit by ourselves any longer. We actually need to be fed by algorithms. We have to be fed by the machine that is telling us to watch this or watch this or watch this as we scroll on social media. And we know that doesn't necessarily make us feel very good, but there's no reservoir from which we can draw our authentic selves because we're being chopped into these little tiny pieces all over the place in our working lives and in our non-working lives as well. And so I think that, like, we have to really, really think about, okay, I have a presentation to do. I'm not very good at doing presentations. Either I'm going to put this time into ChatGPT and asking it to come up with this perfect script for me that will actually bore the hell out of the audience because 6 other people did the exact same thing and everybody can tell, or I'm going to tough through it. It's going to be a struggle. It's going to be a pain in my ass. It might even take me more time, but ultimately you'll actually have total control over the product that you're producing and that you're presenting, and that'll be better for you. And it'll be better for the people watching you. And I think that there's a lot of interesting wisdom that's in that little scenario.
Mm-hmm. One of the things that you just mentioned was it's like, yeah, it might take more time. And then that's the thing that I think is also really key because I sometimes I wonder about like why people are using AI so much. And it always comes down to what you just talked about, the alienation of ourselves from our work and how forced isolation, because, like, what are the things that would have been available to you prior to AI? In terms of like trying to figure something out, trying to write something, trying to communicate something that you just can't figure out. You would either just like continue to slog through it, or you like talk to somebody else about it to try to figure it out, or you like engage in a group to try to figure it out right? Like it's not it shouldn't be a singular isolating experience. To communicate something, if you're trying to create something valuable to communicate. But the other thing that I think about, besides just isolation, is time. Like we have been expected to do so much in our days, to perform so many tasks on our own. And because like everything has been monetized and commercialized, like it becomes harder and harder and harder for us to rely on other people to help make life work. And so again, some people are working multiple jobs, and like the expectations that we have for how someone is supposed to be able to design their life and live a life means that like nobody has time. And at the same time, like any additional time that you have, you're like attempting to zone out as much as possible, potentially because you're exhausted, potentially because you're addicted to an algorithm that's been created to make you addicted. And then so you have little time, and it's like, oh gosh, I got to finish this thing by this time. Let me just use the time eradication machine that also isolates me from the thing that I am producing. It's like this very, very terrible cycle. And in a world where we've just commercialized everything and made everything a slave to capitalism, like I want us to have more time. And I was thinking about that too as I was at this academic conference, and people were talking about these are a bunch of professors like talking about like frustrations that they have with their students. And, it's just like, I feel like we have to have compassion for people who are turning to these tools too, because the whole system is designed for people to feel like they don't have the ability to do these things on their own, but also that they have to rely on something because they don't have time. They're working multiple jobs. They're trying to make ends meet. Like groceries are like way more unaffordable than they were last year. Like, so how do you figure that out? There's all this stuff going on that contributes to this way that people are deeply unhappy at this time, as you've just talked about. And I just like, all of these years of human existence and ingenuity, like just to what? Just like be unhappy and just produce and produce and produce, and to suck the joy out of the experience. Like in some ways we have to figure out how to refuse that as much as possible. And again, like turning to the hopeful part of this, like people recognizing that there is something off about everything feeling so much the same, like gives us an opening to create something different and to demand something new. Not necessarily new, maybe it's old, but to demand something different and something more human.
Yeah. Yeah. While you were talking, I was reminded of this time that I was in a conference on AI, and someone was presenting, and I was standing at the back of the room, and I could see that someone in the audience had ChatGPT open. And the individual was like putting in the arguments that the person at the front of the room was making and asking ChatGPT to verify if those arguments were true or not true.
Oof, oof, oof.
And I kind of thought like, wow. Like, okay, sure, like ignore the expertise that the person in the front of the room has. And obviously they have a point of view, and that point of view is on full display. But I was just kind of trying to think of the rationale that this person had for wanting to like see the full gamut of arguments, I guess, in favor and against this presentation that they were witnessing. And it's just like this tendency to believe that like there's, nothing is true unless it's confirmed by a computer. I can't believe anything that people are saying unless I do my own research. I can't pick up on cues on who I should believe and who I shouldn't believe. Is someone who has a position with an organization that's done public work on the issue, that cites their sources, is this believable, or should I still sit here and basically interrogate their whatever they're saying? And I just was thinking, imagine we got to a point where everything had to be verified by ChatGPT as being true or not true. I think that some people do use the platform in that way. And again, I think back to that example that I gave of this feature in Maclean's by Heather O'Neill. Like, ultimately, why are you doing that? Like, what is the computer giving you that you're not getting from this human at the front of the room that is telling you these things based on their own experiences and their own expertise? I was really stunned when I saw that, and I thought that was a pretty strange harbinger for what might be coming for some people.
Yeah, I've got a cousin who is in law school right now, and he's having such a different experience than I had because, you know, some law schools teach using the Socratic method, which is where you just like point at someone or like say their name and engage in a bunch of back and forth question answer with the student and the professor. And so the way that, law school classrooms are designed like lecture halls, but usually there's like a little bit more space because it allows people to stand and to like do whatever whatever talking and gesticulating they want to do as part of this Socratic method of teaching. And so my cousin's just saying like he can just see people just on ChatGPT or Claude or whatever, like formulating their discussion as the professor is teaching in case they're called upon. So they have it instantly, like what they're going to say as they stand up. And he's like, whoa, whoa, whoa. Like, how is that going to work in legal environments where you like have to think on your feet because you are eradicating your ability to develop that skill? And I was like, that's just like, that feels really weird to me. Like I can't imagine doing school like that. But again, I'm a nerd. I love school. I couldn't imagine doing school like that. It feels like very, very dystopic. And my gosh, Nora, we wanted this episode to be about hope. How did we get here?
Well, we could save that for future because we didn't. So coming soon, we'll talk about hope.
Coming soon, we will talk about hope. But I think, I do think that this is a really important discussion to be having, and I hope it inspires some discussion amongst our listenership. And I do want to hear from people if this is something that they're experiencing too. Have you experienced in your own life or somehow like just this recognition that people are starting to sound the same in this very formulaic way, and like. Again, like there's so much like stuff that comes to my mind even as I say that. Like people do, you know, language does develop around through time as people experience one another in different, like people want to talk like one another. So there is a way that this is just a human experience that we, you know, like even slang, like, you know, like there's slang that will become popular across the English-speaking world because of the way that we kind of coalesce to communicate like one another, because we have a predilection to, or like there is a process through which we try to communicate with one another. We try to sound the same. But this is something different than that. Like it feels like it's that, but on a whole new level. That is taking out, again, the joy and the creativity of communication. And I'm just curious if that's something that other people are also experiencing.